Hello and welcome here with me today on the German Watchmaking channel. Today on the bench we got an Omega Geneve with a full metal bracelet where the bracelet is actually connected to the case itself, not removable. I got it off eBay and it looks pretty rough. As we have a look at the second hand, it seems not original and strangely short. The stem is missing. It's not running yet. And it's pretty scratched up as well. I don't know if someone took off the crown before selling it, wanted to keep it, I really don't know. But we're gonna have a look. The case back also pretty rough shape. The waterproof symbol that's engraved in the case back is completely polished or worn off. And there's a big scratch on top of that. We'll see. We'll open it up, try to find out what's wrong, try to fix what's wrong, and end up with a nice watch. To open it up, I'm using the rubber ball. It's a safe version to open it. And we see the movement looks alright. I was expecting worse, maybe broken off stuff. The rotor spins freely on the first look, just carefully moving it. The balance looks good as well. Hairspring not ripped off, bouncing around. So I'm actually quite surprised, quite happy. I'm taking out the stem, or what's left of it. And this will mean that I'm not able to take the power of the watch now in a safe manner, but we'll figure out a way to do it. But first, the watch is running. Maybe the stem was blocking something. I'm gonna put it on the time grapher, and it shows horrible results. Beat error, no amplitude, but it also didn't run for long, so it's not really representative, but still looks pretty bad. The hands look bad, the loom is off, but it starts running when I'm just tipping my tweezers on the second hand, which could mean that there's some kind of resistance. It could just mean that it's gunked up oil and debris in there that is creating this kind of situation, but most likely something is not adding up. This whole watch seems to be super weird. The dial is something very special as well. Definitely not original. Or if it's original, then someone was drinking at the job this day. But now I can remove the plastic ring and have a closer look at what is supposed to be the watch dial. And there I got the bad news. And actually figuring out that there's glue in the movement, on the movement. Someone took the dial and glued it to the spacer plastic ring. Some strange kind of glue, adhesive debris, I don't know. Strange situation to be in, to find a watch with glue. But I think this makes it even more fun to see if the final result can overcome this barrier. I mean, let's put this back to a future point in time and have a look to disassemble this movement a little bit further. I'm taking off the clamp that is connecting the rotor to the rotor pinion on the automatics work, which is freeing up the rotor, and it still looks okay. So then I have to take off the automatics work, which is held in place by 3 screws. One is going down through the crown wheel, which we can see, and the other 2 are shorter crowns that are going to the movement. And there is the best way to take it off, just flipping it. Nothing happened, and it still looks okay. I'm taking off the balance because it's a safe way to store it and work on the movement. It's always the first thing that you put away. And this is a trick now to keep the power from unwinding against the pallet fork when I'm removing it. Just stacking some Rodico against the wheel system. So when the pallet fork is removed, the power cannot just freely unwind. And when I'm removing the pallet fork and the Rodico, there you can see how the power is leaving the movement in a controlled way without maybe damaging my pallet fork. Now this is the screw for the ratchet wheel. So I can take this off. And there you actually see the screw from the automatics work that is going into the crown wheel, which has a tiny little screw, really tiny. Taking this off. Also now removing the screws from the barrel bridge and realizing there's still the click in place. Just putting some Rodico on the click spring to keep it safe as well. And with the click removed, I can take away the Rodico. The click spring is still in place. Again, the safe way, just to put some Rodico. And there it already went free. Now I can just remove it. And I don't have to search it on the ground on my knees, which is the better way to do it. There, the barrel bridge slides off and gives me access to the mainspring barrel. Still looks fine, nothing broken, just needs a good cleaning. 3 screws again to remove the train wheel bridge, which I'm loosening up right now. And then I can access the train of wheels and take everything apart, have a look underneath. Just really careful here. And this looks also good. I mean, there's some action from the sliding pinion and winding pinion from the keyless works that were grinding on it over the time, removing some of this copper look of it. But okay. There was the 4th wheel, 3rd wheel, and escape wheel, winding pinion and sliding pinion. And now I can remove the bridge that is holding the center wheel in place. Actually funny that there's a little bridge actually for that. Don't know why, but yeah. Now I'm turning my attention to, the nasty part of this. I don't know why someone would do that. I mean, on the other side, I know exactly why someone would do that. The dial is not original and someone tried to put it on this movement. The dial feet, the 2 little feet that are connecting the dial to the movement, to the main plate, were just not in the right place, so they probably got cut off. And then someone decided to just glue the dial on the movement. It's just a little nasty. We can just hope that the glue that was used didn't get any access to the calendar wheel or to any other part on the backside of the movement, which would really be nasty. If this is not the case, then I'm pretty sure I can remove the glue, source a good dial, and have a nice watch again. I mean, this looks good. There doesn't seem to be much residue of the glue in the inside of this spacer ring and on the movement itself. But before concerning with this any further, I'm gonna take apart the rest of the movement itself. Here I'm removing the cannon pinion, which is then freeing up the hour wheel, center wheel on the back. Now this little cover plate is holding the date ring in place and also covering up some parts of the keyless system and the date system to keep them safe. And now I can take away the date ring, the date disc, store it away in my dial holder to keep it safe for later. And yeah, this is where something happened. Boop. That's not good, especially because I had to search this spring for about 1 hour. But I found it. And here it is. Looks like it has never been gone, but it was. But that's just part of the hobby. Spending some time on the floor searching for stuff. This is a wheel that is actually screwed in counter rotation to set the date as well. And then this little arm is fitting into the grooves of the date disc to switch it over. This part is also interesting. It's responsible for the quick set that this movement has. A mechanism where in the winding position you can press the crown inwards and flip the date once forward, which is pretty cool. Now I'm taking apart the rest of the keyless works. Here, the yoke spring, another powerful spring that can fly away, but got safely taken away. Loosening another spring to take out the stop click. Underneath the setting lever spring, and here the yoke. Here, this is the setting lever. Was a little stuck, but in the end it went. And yeah, looks okay. And underneath the setting lever spring, it's an interesting part, was fit into this groove, but I could remove it. And this is the automatics work, also containing a small bridge and 2 gears underneath. This mechanism is just interesting. You rotate the screw just a tiny little bit and it opens up this claw that is gripping to one of the wheels, which is freeing you up to remove. There, the mechanism is shown again, just closing and opening this. And here in further preparation for the cleaning machine, I'm taking out the jewels. The jewel that is sitting underneath the balance and keeping the lower pivot. Closing this again, and there you can see 1481, still some glue. And while I'm trying to remove this wonderful spacer ring of plastic from the dial, I can tell you a little bit more about the movement and the era. This is presumably made in 1972, 1973, and of the 1480 model with 17 jewels, this date version, 1481 with 21 jewels, was made in a cooperation with the watch brand Tissot that produced basically the same movement under the name 2481, and it's just material and small production differences, but the basic patent for the movement is the same. And yeah, it was an affordable answer to the 500 and 700 calibers from Omega to make them more affordable. Here I'm having a look at the crystal that is weirdly damaged as well. Looks like it got some hits or some heat, but it definitely has to be exchanged. Doesn't look good anymore. The rest of the case actually looks okay. The band is in not such a bad shape. It's scratched, of course, but the links are still tight. I tried to source some links to make the band a bit longer, but it's extremely hard to source this kind of bands, this kind of bracelets. It's weird, but they're pretty rare. The crystal has 31.5 millimeters in diameter, which I'm gonna get maybe a 31.6 millimeter one to fit it. And here I'm opening up the mainspring barrel to free up the mainspring, slowly getting it out of there. It definitely was pretty dry. I mean, you can either have it super oiled or way too dry. This one was not in the best shape, but also not terrible. And the last step before putting everything in the cleaning machine is to put the balance back in place. Have it sitting safely on the main plate is probably the best for it to not get damaged during the cleaning. Just blowing on it to see if it's moving, then I can secure it with a screw. Oh, still moving freely. And at last, taking off the balance from the balance assembly. And this is the last step before sorting everything into the baskets in order to clean all the parts in the watch cleaning machine, which we're gonna do now. And with that done, we can turn ourselves to the dial, which looks horrible, but sometimes we just need a little magic. Yeah, and obviously the power of eBay, which helped me to source another dial that is fitting the movement and is actually for the caliber of the watch as well. And this is a golden one. It was not in perfect shape. It was a little bit used and has some yellowing on one side. It was dirty, but I'm trying my best to clean it. These are, by the way, onyx stone in the indices. That is difference. There's rubber ones and the onyx stone ones. I got lucky with the onyx stones ones. And yeah, you see the yellowing in the top right. It's not perfect, but it will definitely be an improvement. Now I'm getting the mainspring back into the mainspring barrel. It is cleaned, the mainspring barrel is oiled, and I'm actually reusing the old mainspring, since by closer inspection it didn't look so bad, and I have a replacement one that I could put in, but since this is still fine, I will reuse it, and then when the time comes, I can still use a new mainspring. But for now, I wanted to reuse as much as I could. Here, I'm putting it back into the mainspring barrel. And we have it sitting in there, and it looks good. A couple of drops of oil on top to lubricate it, and then I can put the barrel arbor back in place. which with a little of rotation sits nicely, a drop of oil, and we can cover the mainspring up. This tool is nice to close it, and then we can turn ourselves to the assembly part. Already oiling a little bit the pivot points, putting center wheel and mainspring barrel back. But this bridge here again that we disassembled before, just for the center wheel, the hour wheel. And yeah, then the barrel bridge can come back in place. Make sure it sits good and can be screwed down with the 2 screws. Already putting the click there. And screwing it down. Always making sure everything is tight, but not too tight. And here it happened. Not sure if you notice, but the color is a little bit different here, which is because this is actually a different movement. Well, some videos of the assembly got lost, and when the watch was finished I didn't want to take it apart again. So I had this Tissot 2481 movement laying around, and I thought it's gonna be easier to just show the assembly of the part of the videos that got lost on this movement, since it's actually the same. But since we have this, you can actually see the difference between the 2 movements. The finishing, one is more having a copper finish, the other one is rather brass. And yeah, here everything is spinning fine. Train of wheels is put together. This is the click spring. It's a little bit more golden, a bit more shiny. But it will fluently go over to the assembly of the Omega movement again. And we'll see if you notice when this will happen. Here, this is the ratchet wheel. 2 drops of oil underneath, just to make the metal on metal action a little bit more smooth. And same here on the crown wheel. First the outer ring of the crown wheel, and then the inner part, also with another drop of oil. This screw is definitely the nastiest one of all in this movement. I mean, in general, this is not the hardest movement to service, but this screw is really tiny. So here we have the sliding pinion and the winding pinion. Sliding pinion first, winding pinion, and this return spring of the setting lever getting screwed down. And then we have the setting lever that is sliding back in, and the yoke also falling in place. And here the click stop that is also getting reinstalled. I'm pretty sure you noticed it already from the color change of the movement. We are back on the Omega, and yeah, this was the part that was missing out of the videos. Now we're back and stay on the Omega as well. But for someone who wants to do the same assembly, I didn't want to leave these parts of the assembly process out and make it complete. Here we have the yoke spring that is getting bent back into place. It's really rebellious and a strange way to put it back, but I looked it up and I'm pretty sure it's meant to be like this. This next part is the setting lever spring, and yeah, it's a big part for this movement. 1 screw to put it in its place, making sure it's tight. And here, the part responsible for the quick set of the date, and it carries the name Date Corrector. I mean, yeah, they're just thinking of some names that could fit, I guess, at this point, and just naming them straight away. Quite tricky to put it in place, because you have to bring the setting lever spring under tension. It's a little pinion, and then you have it. Now just oiling and getting the calendar mechanism installed. I also got an original Omega crown that is fitting to the watch, and a new stem. I thought, just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna install a new stem as well. For now, I'm just gonna put it on in the full length with a little bit of oil or grease, actually, installing it just so I can test everything. Just switch the mechanism, setting, time, position, and winding position. But yeah, now continuing with the calendar works. And this is the date indicator driving wheel, which is sitting right there and is fixed with the counter clockwise rotation screw. And on this position is sitting the Maltese cross for date. That's actually the name for it. There's the screw that I was talking about. Putting it in place until I can turn my eyes to the part that was flying away before, and I was actually not quite sure how to put it together. But yeah, first I'm gonna oil the jewel that is sitting under the date indicator guard, how this bridge is called. And it's sitting on top of the jewel, so before installing it, I thought it would be wise to oil this jewel. And I'm gonna show this under the microscope so it's visible for you to see. Holding it with the tweezers and putting a little drop of oil just in the middle. There. And then I have to pick it up and drop it in place again. If it sits good and a little drop of oil is forming in the middle, then I can close the guard, this spring again, that is responsible for the shock resistance of the watch, and then I can reinstall the guard of the date indicator. I figured it had to be installed in this way, since this little curve of the spring has to be sitting outwards to hold back the lever that is fitting into the date disc grooves. So the way was to screw it down a bit, but not completely, and then fitting my tweezer under there in order to put tension on the spring behind the lever. It took me quite some time, and you have to also find this lever once in a while, and yeah, but at some point I could fit it behind, and then the lever is operating in the way it should. Still oiling and putting back the last wheels that are missing and the can pinion. This bridge that is guarding the date corrector. Otherwise, when you're setting the watch or changing the crown position, this date corrector was always flying off. So after a while I learned that this bridge should always be on when you're changing the crown position. And now we can give it a little wind, a little test if everything is setting up. and it looks okay. I'm oiling the jewels, making sure there's less friction in the system and everything is spinning freely, which it seems to do. Another quick cleaning of the pallet fork in some one dip, and then we can put it back in place, just fit it into the groove, and put the pallet fork bridge on top. And now comes the tricky part. I did this under the microscope, so it's more visible, to fit this tiny pivot point of the pallet fork into the jewel. And at some point, it just falls into place. And that's very satisfying. Right there. There it's in. And of course, you have to make sure that it's in the bottom as well. If it's moving freely, then you can put the screws in place, screw it down, see if it still moves freely, and then you can put a little bit of wine to the watch to see if it flips over and is working correctly as it should. Yeah, I'm still cleaning the capsule of the balance with some pegwood before oiling it and putting it in place as well. Same procedure, tiny drop of oil. This time I can assemble it completely. Open it up and put the jewel back in. Easy as that. But while closing it, this should not happen. And this should not happen as well. Actually, this is really not even possible because it shouldn't get out of there, but it did. And putting it back in place was hell. Took me like 1.5 hours. There it looks like it's almost in, but it was hard. I did it, it was hard, it was off camera. I couldn't keep filming for hours, so it's a really interesting procedure that, the whole balance assembly is friction fit and it just shouldn't happen, but it did. Now, gonna put our eyes to the automatic works. Here putting the wheels back in place, closing it up with a screw. Putting this bridge on is not so easy as well. I was holding it in my hand while screwing it down, which is probably a better way of doing this. You see how I'm shaking here. But it worked in the end. And this is a really, really tiny part, which is then consisting out of 6 or 7 parts itself. But you can put it together, oiling the jewels and sitting it on top of the movement. This is the longer screw that is going through to the ratchet wheel. To be careful to put it in the right place, otherwise you're screwing into some other part it should not be screwed in. Just oiling the rotor pinion and fitting the rotor back on the automatics work. Making sure it spins. Of course it needs this little clamp. But just making sure it goes around and it's actually winding. It's turning over the click, and then this clamp can go on. Pretty easy actually. I was imagining this to be harder, and now just a final test. Going much better now. Putting wind in the watch, and the balance immediately starts spinning, which is really nice. There's still a lot to do though. For example, turning our attention to the hands, which need new loom for, just seeing them when it's darker. And I decided to do this process myself. There's a set that you can get that is containing some kind of glue and different colors of fluorescent material powder that is in combination letting the hands glow in the dark. I mean, I just eyeballed the mixture. The surface tension is then keeping this mixture on the hands. And then it has to be stored away for about 4 to 5 hours to dry. But during this time, we can turn ourselves to some other problems. For example, the case and the bracelet. It's pretty clearly visible. It's pretty clearly visible that this bracelet has seen better times as well. It's really damp and it's missing a buff, so we'll try to make it shiny again. For this I have this polishing machine and we are putting some polishing compound on there and then just working our way softly towards a more polished state. And I mean, after some ultrasonic cleaning, this is the final result. And it's by far not perfect, but I mean, definitely better than before. And I'm quite pleased with it. So here we have the spacer ring for the dial. And as you can see, there's lots of glue residue on it. And in general, the condition is not so nice. So I replaced it with this metal one. It is actually original for the Tissot watch. That's one of the parts that Tissot definitely had a better idea of than Omega. But yeah, I thought I'm not going to reuse this plastic ring, and to have an upgrade like that without using it would be kind of sad. Here you can see the two holes for the dial feet that have to stay free, and this is the spacer ring clicking back in place, and we can actually reinstall the new dial to the movement. I'm very pleased about it. It looks much better, much more clean, and yeah, just making sure the date is flipping over correctly as it should, and there it goes. And now in the blink of turning over, I'm installing the hands to 12 o'clock, putting them on, and yeah, now just after 12 o'clock the date is flipping over, putting the seconds hand on, and the watch is running. Now I just need to put the tension ring back. These two screws are holding the tension ring that is then holding it in the case. Just a few final touches before putting it back in the case, and then I can install the stem, the crown. Here I'm measuring the distance that I'm going to cut off the stem, marking this down, and then bullseye. Now I'm just sanding it off to make it nice and smooth, and with a little bit of Loctite, putting the crown on. And this should hold for some time. Needs to dry a bit, but then it will be nice and fastened. Its final touches with oil, and then inserting the crown with the stem into the movement for the first time, and the right length. And it's sitting good. Have to pull it out a little bit. Zack, and there it is. There has to be a little bit of space in order for the quick set of the date to work. And then the case back gets a new gasket there, and we can put it on the case, screw it down. Also, the bracelet reinstalled, putting back together. There we go, and looks nice. And here we have it, testing the quick set. And by pressing the crown, it actually switches over. Setting and winding is working fine as well. And having a look at the time grapher with plus 5 seconds a day and a healthy amplitude, it's safe to say that we could bring this one back to life. Thank you for watching and following this journey. Ciao.